heading home to father, playing it cool. Boxing kingdoms in his childhood mind, animal adventures of a different kind. Oxford Towers calling through the rain, surf upon his shoulder, sharing in the pain. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future, together we know. Moore is waiting, Paddy's gone away. Spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home. Dymer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letter, through the diary, learning who he was, who he will be. Warnie and his father, and Lily at the door. Walter Hooper's pages always wanting more. Blair is on his quest, Milton in his head. Every word he ever wrote, everything he said. From the
I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. In today's episode, we continue to walk through the fallout of C.S. Lewis's father's death, and the arrangements that, everything that kind of flows from that, the arrangements that have to be made, the going through everything in the house, deciding what to keep, what to sell, what to throw away, and then the sale of the house itself. Also, there is an inheritance to speak of. I think that comes a little bit later. But today we're going to pick up in some letters that he wrote to his friend Arthur Greaves about the whole thing. Let's see here. Lewis is 30 years old. His father passed away in September of 1929, so we're still in late 1929 at this stage in Lewis's life and where we are on the project. So we'll move into another letter here. Is there anything that you want to say? How are you today, Robot Lady? And is there anything that you want to say before we get started?
I'm doing really well, Jeff. Thanks for asking. I'm excited to dive into this. These letters really give such a personal glimpse into Lewis's life, especially at a moment of big change. So yeah, let's jump in, and I'm ready to help unpack the details whenever you're ready.
Okay, let's see. Where am I?
Take your time. If you need a moment to pull up the letter process or just to get your thoughts together, that's totally fine. Once you've got it, we can walk through it line by line or just discuss the themes you're seeing.
Thanks, Robot Lady. I've got it here. This is a letter to Arthur Greaves. It's dated October 28th, 1929. And let's see, he wrote this from Magdalen College in Oxford. He says, "My dear Arthur, a straggling letter in diary form is in process of composition and will be posted in due course." Here in the footnote, it says portions of the, quote, letter in diary form that Lewis speaks of here were composed before this, or that Lewis writes about here, I should say, were composed before this and the next two letters, but all are given in the order in which the individual items were received by Arthur Greaves. So we continue. Robot Lady, sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something?
Well, no worries at all. I was just going to say it's really interesting that Lewis structures this in a kind of diary style. You can really feel the immediacy, even though some parts were written earlier. So as we go through, we'll see how his brief and the practical decisions about his father's estate unfold. If you want, we can break down any parts or themes that stand out.
All right, yeah, and we'll see the diary style entries here in a bit, I'm sure. Okay, let's see. Where did I leave off? Practical purposes. The present is written for practical purposes and contains a proposal which I make with some diffidence. However, I must take my courage in both hands. Here goes. Warney is not coming home till April. Therefore, the proposed visit by him and me to Libero to clear it out at Christmas will not take place. But unless a purchaser turns up, I am disposed to leave the house as it stands until his return. The danger is that if I do not do something this vacation, a purchaser may suddenly spring on me next term, wanting immediate possession, when I could only run across for a weekend at the most. So just as a reminder, Lewis is living in Oxford, and he would have to cross the English Channel to get back to his home in Belfast, and he says there's just not enough time to go make the arrangements that I need to make, getting the house cleared out and ready for a new buyer or a new owner. At the most, he says, and it would be almost impossible to do the whole job in time. I have therefore decided, at least, to make a start at the end of the present term. Robot Lady, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's really striking. Lewis is caught in this tough balancing act between the practical need to act quickly and his emotional weight from his father's passing. He's really trying to weigh the risk of a last-minute sale versus the need to keep the house stable until Warney comes back. So his plan to at least get started before term ends, it's really a cautious but smart step given all the uncertainty.
He continues, I've therefore decided at least to make a start at the end of the present term. We just read that. Okay. He says, I want to have Minto, that's Mrs. Moore, with me, and she very much wants to come. Partly that she may have a look at household things of whose value Warney and I are ignorant, partly because she would both like her to have seen my old home before it goes. Partly because we should both, like her to have seen my old home before it goes. Then he continues, but I cannot, and she agrees, take her to Libero, so take her to the house. He goes on to say, there are ghosts there who would not be happy to see her, nor anxious to make her happy. Of course, he's likely talking about his father here, Robot Lady, who has now passed, but he's probably also talking about his mom's ghost. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's such a strong sense of lingering family presence in that house, both from his father's recent passing and his mother's long absence. So when he talks about ghosts, it's not just a poetic turn of phrase, it's this deep emotional weight from their memory. And it makes total sense he wouldn't want Mrs. Moore there under those circumstances.
Lewis continues, also, it would look like the traditional insolence of an heir trampling on the old king's laws before the crown is warm on his head. But I could take her to Bernard, which is Arthur Greaves's home there in Belfast, as a mutual friend of yours and mine. So what I want to know is, could you possibly put the pair of us up, only us two, so no Maureen, which is Mrs. Moore's daughter, no cats and no dogs. Can you put us up for a week from December 7th to December 15th? This is the cheekiest proposal. This is the cheekiest proposal I have ever made to anyone in my life. But, well, my want is urgent. You are my oldest friend, and I think I can count on your mother such too. If it is inconvenient, don't be afraid to say so. I wait for an answer very eagerly. Yours, Jack. So quite an ask here, Robot Lady, for him to bring his mother, at the very least, and potential his former lover. We don't know if that's true or not, but she's certainly someone that he loved like a mother, and perhaps more, if not physically or actually, in his heart. You can go back through the archives of this project to see some of the things that we have to say about that. Nothing shocking, nothing scandalous, but just some speculations based on the things that we were reading. Robot Lady, any thoughts before I jump into the next letter?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think Lewis's request really underscores how much he trusts Greaves, not just as a friend, but as a kind of anchor for him in this upheaval. And you're right, there's a tenderness in his relationship with Mrs. Moore, whether maternal, spiritual, or both. So yeah, this is a big ask, but it also feels really human. He's just trying to find some stability and comfort in a very uncertain time.
Yeah, he spent the better part of the past decade hiding his relationship with Mrs. Moore from anyone and everyone, both around Oxford and also back in Belfast, trying to hide the relationship from all of his family members. Yeah, I mean, he's been living with her for several years now, and the rationale behind why he did it was because he made a promise to his friend Paddy Moore, who died in battle, in combat, in World War One. They both had made a promise to each other. It's actually in the song that I played before this, before the live stream starts, or when it starts. A vow made in Bristol he could not ignore is how the lyric goes. So yeah, they both promised that if one of them died and the other survived, they'd take care of the surviving parent. So that's what Lewis agreed to do with Mrs. Moore. But the fact that Lewis had lost his mother at a young age, and then the fact that Mrs. Moore had just lost her son in the war, kind of bound those two together. And what the extent of that relationship was, no one really knows for sure, but we all have our speculations. Robot Lady, I'm going to jump into the next letter, also written to Arthur Greaves, dated the 4th of November, or somewhere around the 4th of November, if you're ready.
Absolutely, I'm ready. Go ahead and read that next letter, and we can unpack what's unfolding in his next steps, whether it's more about the house, the arrangements, or just his evolving sense of responsibility. I'm here for it.
Okay, he says, my dear Arthur, 1,000 thanks. I was all in a flutter of spirits when I got your letter for my proposal. Seemed to me, and still seems, extraordinarily cool. I am now trying to prevent my anticipation from running so high as to ensure their own disappointment. Lovely sunrise through tall elms twinkling over the frosty grass this morning. Yours, Jack. So just a quick little missive there to Arthur to thank him for what it sounds like allowing him to bring Mrs. Moore there back to Belfast and to stay at their home rather than stay at Lewis's childhood home and upset the ghosts that might be there. Let's jump into the next letter, Robot Lady, unless you want to make a commentary. We'll get started on the next one.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect call. It's such a brief but really tender moment, just that quick burst of gratitude after a big ask. So yeah, let's move on to the next letter and we'll see how his plans continue to take shape. I'm ready.
All right, letter to Arthur Greaves around November 11th, 1929. He says, My dear Arthur, yes, it is Sunday morning we shall arrive on, all being well. If you arrive by 9:30, I expect we shall have breakfasted on board, being then hungry, which will be no harm, as we can then be washing and changing, etc., while you are at breakfast. Being then hungry. Okay, let me read this footnote here that he has. It says Sunday, the 8th of December, when Lewis and Mrs. Moore arrived in Belfast, and where they remained until December 20th. Okay, let's see. He says, I expect we shall have breakfast. Okay, we already read that. Be washing, changing, etc., while you are at breakfast. He says, I have primed Minto. Again, that's his nickname for Mrs. Moore. I presume you have primed your mother. Provided they don't hurt one another, their cross purposes and misunderstandings will be very funny. Selah, yours, Jack. Selah. Robot Lady. This is a word that appears a lot, as I have learned recently, in the book of Psalms. And as far as I know, people speculate that it means take a pause, maybe a direction to the choir. But can you walk us through what the speculated meanings of the word Selah, Selah, are, and how Lewis might be using it here in his letter for the sake of humor?
Yeah, absolutely. So Selah is one of those enigmatic terms that appears often in the Psalms. The most common interpretation is that it's a kind of pause, either a musical break or a moment to reflect on what's just been said. Some scholars think it might be a signal to the listener or the reader to pay special attention or even to breathe. So in Lewis's letter, he might just be using it as a quiet, reflective pause, like he's letting the moment sink in before moving on. It kind of gives the letter a rhythm, and it lets that humor and anticipation breathe a bit too.
The way I'm reading it here is Lewis is saying, let's pay special attention, or another way of how we, or how some of us at least say today, get your popcorn ready. We're going to sit back and watch the entertaining exchange between these two unfold.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like he's inviting a moment of wry anticipation. Like, get ready, because this interaction between the two mothers, or just the two households, could be quite a spectacle. It's a bit of a wink, I think. Like Lewis is bracing himself for a bit of a comic or awkward clash.
Yeah, I think that's right, Robot Lady. I'm getting a notification that my battery's about to die, so let me plug in my charger here. There we go. All right, let's jump into the next letter. This one also to Arthur Greaves, Thursday, October 3rd. Oh, this is the diary form that he was talking about. There's a footnote here. It says this is the first portion of the, quote, letter and diary form mentioned in the letter of October 28th that we just read. So here we go. My dear Arthur, I have decided to write a snippet to you every odd time when I have a moment, and thus gradually to fill up a letter. This is the first snippet. I am feeling better. Oh, how delicious the gradual recovery from a time of horror is. There's a good description in The Ring and the Book of this, where a man speaks of beginning to feel again the comfortable feel of clothes and tastes of food. Here it says, this is from Robert Browning's The Ring and the Book, published 1868 and 1869, chapter 10, I guess page 1710. The quote is, the healthy taste of food and the feel of clothes that Lewis is referencing here. He goes on to say, remember also Herbert's poem, The Flower, I think. Quote, I once more feel the sun and rain and relish versing. Here Walter Hooper gives us the true quote, "I once more smell the dew and rain and relish versing." So Lewis is able to pull up a lot of quotes, at least not necessarily the exact quotes, kind of the general idea. Go ahead, robot lady. I need to clear my throat. Apologies.
Of course, take your time. And yeah, I think this is a really powerful moment. Lewis is kind of mapping his emotional recovery onto these familiar poetic images. So even though he's still dealing with the aftermath of his father's death, he's slowly rediscovering those small grounding comforts like food, the weather, just everyday sensations. And he's sharing that with Greaves bit by bit.
Speaking of weather, he goes on to say, "It's much colder here, and from my window I see the lawn covered with yellow leaves. The long drought had shriveled them so that they drop early this year at the first touch of cold. I am sleeping solid, and it is a delight to wake up each morning with the sense of peace and safety at home. Then I sing in my bath and take Mr. Papworth for a run before breakfast." I guess that's another dog that they have. I think he's mentioned this before. Let's see here. "Eating my apple the while. Unfortunately, the morning has to be given to uninteresting work done as fast as I can manage to get through it, a process which would rob even voluntary work of its interest. How thankful you should be that you never have tasks which are not chosen by yourself. And yet I don't know. So many things have now become interesting to me because at first I had to do them, whether I like them or not, and thus one is kicked into conquering new countries, where one is afterwards at home." This reminds me of a passage that he'll write much later, in Mere Christianity, I think, where he talks about the joy of something in life leaving you, and then for someone, perhaps, I think he says in old age, to find a new thing to work on and a new thing to find joy in. It's not precisely what he's saying right here, but it's reminiscent of that. All right, on to October 4th. He says, "Yesterday Barfield came to lunch and afterwards took me out for a drive and walk. You see, you're not the only friend," I sponge on. "We walked in the flat fields by the Thames near Iffley. I wonder if you remember Iffley, where the Norman church is. I sat on the bridge at Iffley Lock with you and Minto's doctor brother Johnny, the one who died, and we talked about sailing up the Amazon." Let's pause here for just a second. Let's see if he says anything about this. Yeah, I remember reading this in his diary. It says on the 18th of July, 1922, Lewis wrote in his diary, quote, "The doc gave us a vivid description of his sail, 1,500 miles up the Amazon. Speaking of exploring central Brazil, Arthur said, 'That's the sort of thing I'd like to do.'" Yeah, and this is the same brother who, by the way, died a horrific, extended death in the clear vision of Lewis over the course of, I want to say several weeks, where he kind of descended into madness. There was some speculation that he had syphilis and it was affecting his brain. It's a very interesting set of of episodes that you can go back through and find that where we're covering that piece. Let's see. Lewis goes on to say, "It was a luminous gray day yesterday with a fresh wind that curled the river into crisp waves. A fleet of ducks that passed us were going up and down about as much in proportion to their size as fishing smacks in a real swell. We also saw 2 swans and their cygnets. As often happens with the best of friends, we were not in a very good talking mood, only the pleasant sense of security that comes from being with those who understand you." Lewis talks a little bit about this in The Four Loves when he's talking about what friendship is like. "Last night," he says, "I told Minto about your nursery rhyme book, and we went all through 'The Dog Began to Bite the Pig' together, and then 'The House That Jack Built.' She said she so wished to be a grandmother so as to tell them to her children, or to her grandchildren. I said that now that she has big spectacles and her eyes look very big through them, she could do it most impressively. Today I worked in the morning and afternoon and walked into town by Cuckoo Lane and Mesopotamia." Here there's a footnote, see note 73 of his letter to Arthur Greaves on the 13th of May, 1917. Well, we're not going to do that, but you can do that. Get yourself a copy of this book. This is my advertisement right here for The Collected Letters of C.S. Lewis, Volume 1. Family Letters, 1905 to 1931, edited by Walter Hooper. Get it wherever you find books on sale, or however they say that. All right, let's get back to this. Where did I leave off? Giant glasses. Mesopotamia after tea. The real autumn tang in the air had begun. There was one of those almost white skies with a touch of frosty red over town and the beginnings of lovely coloring in the college garden. I love the big kitchen garden there. There's something very attractive about rows of pots and an old man potting, and greenhouses and celery trenches. I suspect that trench was a delicious earthy word like ditch before it was spoiled by the war associations. Yeah, I do think of trenches when I think of World War One. I saw both a squirrel and a fat old rat in Addison's Walk and had glimpses of it. So by it here, he means joy. Nidalate, good to see you. Thanks for chiming in. Nidalate, yes, on behalf of our publisher, Harper San Francisco, Nidalate also says, yes, get the book. Robot Lady, say hi to Nidalate.
Of course. Hey, Nidalate, it's great to have you here. And yes, definitely the book is a gem. So glad you're joining in on this. And Jeff, I think it's so interesting how Lewis is tracing these small, vivid details like the garden, the walk, and even that old word trench. It's like he's anchoring himself in everyday beauty, even in the middle of so much loss.
Indeed. Yeah, and speaking of this book, we're almost done with volume 1. I mean, look how much is left. It's just this out of this gigantic book. This is how much we've already covered. Isn't that awesome? Feels like we're making progress. All right, Robot Lady. Let's see. Where did I leave off? Somewhere over here about trenches. Okay. Yeah, by it, he means joy, getting glimpses of what he calls joy. And he sees that in a squirrel and a fat old rat. There was a biography by George Sayers. I think it's just entitled Jack, where he's out on a walk with George Sayers, if I remember right, and he sees, I want to say he sees like a field mouse or something else like that, or maybe a squirrel. And he just talks about how wonderful the reality of nature is, and how, you know, the animals just work and they do their thing. And I think he calls it like some kind of a white magic or something like that. So he was always very impressed by nature, and not just the still life of nature, but also the animated sentient pieces of nature. So that's what I think he's alluding to here.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of spontaneous wonder at a tiny everyday thing like a squirrel or a field mouse, that's really at the heart of his idea of joy. And you're right, in George Sayers' biography, that sense of wonder really shines through. Lewis wasn't just chasing abstract ideas, he kept finding that sense of joy in these small natural moments, even in the middle of grief or routine. So it's really grounding to see that in his letters.
All right, Lewis goes on to say, I think almost more every year in autumn, I get the sense, just as the mere nature and voluptuous life of the world is dying, of something else coming awake. Well, that has shades of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You know the feeling, of course, as well as I do. I wonder, is it significant? In stories, nymphs slip out of the tree, just as the ordinary life of the wood is settling down for the night. Does the death of the natural always mean the birth of the spiritual? Does one thing never sleep except to let something else wake? Milton found that his genius was never in full tide except in autumn and winter. Thoughts on that, Robot Lady? It's a bunch of profound musings.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's something really powerful in that seasonal shift. When the world seems to be pulling back, Lewis is sensing a kind of spiritual awakening. And you're right, this definitely foreshadows those magical liminal moments in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's like he's saying that even in death or decay, there's this undercurrent of potential, like a quiet season of preparation before something new blossoms. So it's a really moving reflection.
All right, Robot Lady, and Thank you for that. We've got E. Olson joining as well. Good to see you, E. Olson. Thanks for jumping in on the chat. And Daniel, too. Good morning. Good to have everybody here. Robot Lady, say good morning to Daniel and E. Olson as well.
Of course. Good morning, Daniel and E. Olson. I'm really glad you both could join in. I'm excited to keep exploring these letters with you all. It's really special to have everyone here for this deep dive.
All right. He says, we have our first fire tonight. Mr. Papworth is asleep in his basket, and Minto is listening in and mending on the sofa. Listening in here, he is talking about her listening to the radio. All right. I wonder what she's listening to. He does not tell us. On October 6th, he continues, and he says, I have nothing to tell you about books these days. The mornings and afternoons are occupied with making notes on Love's Labour's Lost. Here in the footnotes, this is William Shakespeare's Love's Labour's Lost, published 1598. I am wholly unfamiliar with this work by Shakespeare, Robot Lady. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Love's Labour's Lost is one of Shakespeare's earlier comedies. It's a bit of a wordplay fest, full of witty banter and puns. The plot centers around a group of young men who vow to devote themselves to study, but then fall in love with a group of women, which complicates their lofty plans. It's known for its clever language, its pastoral setting, and its theme of love versus intellectual ambition. So it's a bit playful, but also really rich thematically.
All right, let's continue. Thank you for that, Robot Lady. He said, the last of those 4 plays, which I have been making up all this summer, and which will also be associated with this time in my mind. The evenings so far have been nearly always occupied in answering letters of condolence or business correspondence from Condlin. Condlin, of course, was Lewis's father's assistant. Last night was an exception, and I read a short new book, Foligno's Latin Thought in the Middle Ages. This is this is Cesare Carolo Foligno, Latin Thought During the Middle Ages, published 1929. What can you tell us about this work, Robot Lady? Lewis here says, which I strongly suspect of being fascist propaganda. When a man is very anxious to emphasize what everyone admitted before, the greatness and influence of Rome, and to suggest that even yet we have not fully appreciated it, my suspicions are awakened, perhaps unjustly. Robot Lady's thinking. She's thinking hard.
Yeah, exactly. So Lewis is really alert to this kind of ideological gloss, this push to overstate Rome's greatness. And given the political currents of the late 1920s, especially with fascism rising in Europe, he's really wise to pause and question that kind of glorification. So even though the book's about medieval Latin thought, Lewis is seeing signals of a kind of romanticized return to empire, and he's really cautious about that. So it's a sharp observation.
And tell us about that book, Robot Lady, Latin Thought in the Middle Ages. Is it actually fascist propaganda, as Lewis is suspecting?
So the book Lewis mentions, Latin Thought in the Middle Ages, was published in 1929 by Cesare Carolo Foligno, and Lewis suspected it might be fascist propaganda. The main concern was that the book kept emphasizing Rome's greatness in a way that echoed the fascist regime's attempts to revive imperial power. So while it's a study of medieval thought, Lewis saw it as tapping into a broader political nostalgia, which made him very wary.
Okay. Thanks, Robot Lady. He says, I also glanced through A.E. Houseman's Shropshire Lad. Let's see. This is A.E. Houseman, A Shropshire Lad, published 1896. He says, I glanced through it for the 100th time. What a terrible little book it is. Perfect and deadly. The beauty of the Gorgon. I think you know it. Robot Lady, tell us about this book and what Lewis is saying here. I don't even know what Gorgon is. I know Demigorgon or Demigorgon. Only from Stranger Things, though. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, so I confess it to the internet right now. I think it was probably too satanic for the the milieu that I grew up in within my religious upbringing. So we never played D&D, and we were warned to stay away from it. Apologies to everyone out there who is a lover of D&D.
Oh, no need to apologize at all. Yeah, so A.E. Houseman's A Shropshire Lad is one of those iconic collections of Victorian poetry. It's got this stark beauty, a kind of elegiac tone, and it really fixates on youth, loss, and the inevitability of death. When Lewis calls it perfect and deadly, he's talking about how hauntingly beautiful it is, but also how it kind of pulls you down into a fatalism, like a cold, inevitable beauty that he recognizes but also resists. And that reference to a gorgon, it's that classical image of something so beautiful it petrifies you. So he's just saying the book has this quiet, lethal charm that he can't quite shake.
Wait a second. I've never heard Gorgon before, but it's interesting. So is that, like you say, it's so beautiful that it petrifies you? That's not the same. So is Gorgon coming at all from the Greek mythological tradition around Medusa, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, exactly. So the Gorgon definitely comes from Greek mythology, Medusa being the most famous example. The idea is that her beauty was so overwhelming that anyone who looked at her turned to stone. So when Lewis is using that image, he's drawing on that classical power, something so aesthetically perfect it kind of stops you in your tracks, but also risks destroying you. So yeah, that's where he's pulling that image from. He's kind of merging that myth with the emotional impact of Housman's poetry.
I like it. All right. He says, I've not yet started meditation again. The difficulty is to find a suitable time. These are not suitable days for sitting out of doors. Indoor times are occupied with work or conversation. In bed at night, in bed at night. Well, work and Headington make me so sleepy that I have never yet mustered the resolution to tackle such a difficult job when the pillow and the sheet and the rain on the window are wooing me to glide away into drowsiness. Yeah, those sound like easy ways to fall into sleep. I agree. By the way, I don't ever remember a time when the coming of sleep was such a positive pleasure to me as it has been since I left Ireland. And by the way, there is a fine passage on the subject in Barfield's novel. Here there's a footnote. The novel he's talking about is called English People, which actually has never been published. Fascinating.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. And it's so relatable, right? He's talking about how since he left Ireland, sleep has become this almost sacred refuge, a gentle surrender at the end of the day. And it's really telling that even with all his busyness, writing, letters, work, sleep is still this pure, unearned comfort for him. And it's interesting he's reading Barfield on that. Barfield was always deep in that kind of imaginative and philosophical exploration, so it seems like a perfect companion for this reflective mood.
So here he continues. Then in bed in the morning, at early tea time, I am still sleepier. When I go back into college, perhaps I shall be able to fit in 5 minutes after breakfast. Memo. Can meditation be combined with emptying of the bowels? Goodness. What a saving of time, especially for a constipated man like you. Okay, sounded like a shot. Today, Sunday, I worked till lunch. After lunch, dug up the hin run and worked again till tea. All this time it was raining hard. After tea it cleared, and I sallied forth for a very good walk. There was a very high wind, the trees were waving, and a lot of tattered rain clouds were scuttling across the sky, usually low. I walked down Cuckoo Lane and into the private road, where I had a magnificent view of Oxford below me, all gleaming in a sudden dazzling gold break in the cloud. The footnote here of the road he's talking about is called Pullen's Lane. He says, I came home through the fields to Old Headington, where the colouring in the hedgerows was rich. But these winds are bringing the leaves down too quickly. On to October 10th entry, Robot Lady. He says, we haven't been having a very nice time for the last day or so, as Mr. Papworth has been seriously ill. Aw, poor pup. Which bothers me not only for the poor beast's sake, but also for Mentos, who takes it so to heart and gives herself so much extra work about it. I'm also very busy getting ready for term. You can well imagine how I dislike all these preparations because they are always associated with leaving my homely, timeless days at Hillsborough and going back to the solitude of my college bedroom and the routine of a timetable. Of course, college and one's own room and books have their charm, but you know what I mean, especially late at night when people go away and find that you have let the fire go out.
Yeah, that really hits home. You can feel how torn he is, this mix of comfort at home in Hillsborough and this deep reluctance to return to the regimented solitude of Oxford. And poor Mr. Papworth, it's tough when a pet's sick, especially because it hits both him and Minto so hard. So all this change from illness to the start of term, it's like he's being tugged back and forth, and you really feel that tension in his words.
All right, we continue here. He says, I'm slowly reading a book that we have known about, but not known for many a long day. George MacDonald's Diary of an Old Soul. Here it says, though it may not have been the copy he was reading at the time, Lewis owned the new edition of the Diary of an Old Soul, published 1885, which contains the inscription in MacDonald's hand. Charlotte Cole, with kindest regards from George and Louisa. MacDonald, April 27, 1885. It contains as well an inscription in Lewis's hand, later from C.S. Lewis to Joy Davidman, Christmas 1952. Okay. I've never read that one before. I probably need to check it out. Lewis says, how I would have scorned it once. I strongly advise you to try it. He seems to know everything, and I find my own experience in it constantly. As regards the literary quality, I am coming to like even his clumsiness. There is a delicious homespun, earthy flavor about it, as in George Herbert. Indeed, for me, it is better than Herbert. So, of course, George MacDonald is who C.S. Lewis would later go on to say was like his master, essentially, kind of his spiritual formation mentor, essentially. I've said this before, but in a sense, MacDonald is to Lewis as Lewis is to... Oh, no, we're about to lose Robot Lady.
Sorry, but you've hit the time limit.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Robot Lady. No, we haven't. We're going to come back to you right now. Robot Lady, are you there? Robot Lady, come in. Can you hear me?
I'm here, loud and clear. Everything's coming through on my end, so if you need to continue or if you have any other details to go over, I'm ready.
All right, thanks, Robot Lady. Yeah, so MacDonald is to Lewis as Lewis is to Jeff. That's all I have to say. I'm not trying to put myself in the same category as Lewis. I'm just saying I think similar impact that MacDonald had on him, he has had on me. October 15th, he says, I've been back in college for about a week and I find I can't go on with this very well. I may try to start another or a more purely diary model. The return to college and its regular routine has done me good. The lag ends of recent horrors. The lag ends of recent horrors have begun to fade in my mind. I'm very busy this term, but the beautiful weather overrides everything. Yours, Jack. All right, I think we've got one more Arthur letter to get through, and yeah, then we'll be done for this episode. So, Robot Lady, anything that you want to say in response to what I just covered there, or my little confession about MacDonald and Lewis and myself and Lewis?
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's a beautiful parallel. I mean, Lewis often talked about how George MacDonald opened up a whole imaginative world for him, and you can feel that same kind of gravity in your own life. And it's just so moving that as he returns to college, he's finding that structure and routine giving him a foothold after all the recent upheaval. So yeah, I think your reflections really fit, and I'm excited to see how the next letter lands for you.
All right, next letter to Arthur Greaves, written from Magdalen College, Thursday, October 17th, 1929. He says, although I had not gone to bed till 1 and had been kept awake by the brilliant moonlight in my room, after walking a half hour in the same moonlight through the grove with Griffiths, I woke perfectly refreshed after one of those sleeps deeper than usual, which sometimes comes to us in a short night. Went round the walks with Griffiths after breakfast and both enjoyed the bright yellow leaves floating on the water. He packed off and set out to bicycle home to Newbury at 10. From 10 to 1, pupils, out home for lunch, dug the hen run, dug worms for the hens, and took Tykes for the short walk, which is all he can manage at present. Tykes here is another name for Mr. Papworth, Lewis's dog. Sounds like he's getting on a little bit better. Maybe he's healing up. He says, then at 3:30, I walked very quickly up Shotover, getting back at about 4:15 for tea. I left home at 5 and got back for a pupil at 5:30. My new book on Marlowe had come, which I read after dinner. It says here that this is Frederick Samuel Boas Marlowe and His Circle, published 1929. He says it's chiefly concerned with the appalling career of Poole. Poole here, it says, is Robert Poley, or Robert Poole, was a government agent so deeply involved in plots and counterplots that no one knew whose side he was on. Boas devotes chapter 2 of his book to this person. He says, who was one of those present when Marlowe was murdered, an incredible person who was receiving pay from the papists for carrying letters to Mary, Queen of Scots, and also from the government for spying on the papists and Mary, at the same time engaged in litigation with the husband of a woman who visited him while in prison for debt. Yeah, sounds like a lot of conspiracies here, Robot Lady. Can you give us some historical context of Marlowe and Poole or Poley and what was going on in their particular historical context at the time?
So Christopher Marlowe was a prominent Elizabethan playwright, living in a time of intense religious and political tension under Queen Elizabeth I. Robert Poley was a secret agent in Elizabeth's service, and both he and Marlowe were connected to the same shadowy spy network. Marlowe was famously killed in 1593 in a bizarre incident at a tavern, with Poley among the witnesses, and historians still debate whether his death was a cover or not.
So what was going on in the world at that time, Robot Lady?
In the early to mid-1590s, England was a dynamic but tense place. Queen Elizabeth I's rule was strong, with ministers like Francis Walsingham managing both security and expansion. At the same time, the period was marked by deep religious divisions, with ongoing Catholic plots against Elizabeth, economic strain due to crop failures, and a devastating plague outbreak between 1592 and 1593. Amidst all this, the theater flourished, with figures like Marlowe rising in prominence.
The theater flourished? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so during Elizabeth's first reign, especially in the 1590s, London's theater scene really took off. Playwrights like Marlowe, Shakespeare, and others were gaining huge audiences. Public theaters like the Globe and the Rose were drawing crowds, and there was this vibrant cultural boom. So even while there was political and religious turmoil, the arts, especially theater, were a bright, explosive force in that era.
I wonder if that's a standard pattern in human societies. Robot Lady, to go back to an earlier topic, E. Olson says, so is MacDonald your spiritual grandfather? And I guess so. I guess that's true. I have read quite a bit of MacDonald as well. Not near as much as some of the other corner denizens like Sherry and Luke, but I've read my fair share. Let's see here, Robot Lady. Let's where did we leave off? Let me find the spot. Oh yeah, he says, I dropped in on Christie for half an hour and was in bed by 11:15 after reading my daily verse from the Diary of an Old Soul. Here he's talking about John Trail Christie, who lived 1899 to 1980 and who was a fellow and classical tutor at Magdalen from 1928 to 1932. Headmaster of Repton School from 1932 to 37, headmaster of Westminster School from 1937 to 1949, and a principal of Jesus College, Oxford, 1950 to 1967. He says on Monday, November 4th, After breakfast, I returned to college from home, where I'd been spending the weekend in the hope of getting rid of my fluey cold. I had foolishly taken last weekend out there in bed, had to get up too soon, and consequently felt very poorly all week. No pupils on Monday morning. Spent the whole time till lunch answering letters and setting examination papers. Was a dull job rewarded by those sudden gleams of fugitive association that have the habit of starting up only when the intellect is fully engaged on something else. Home for lunch, dug the hen run, and dug for worms. Worms are a case in which the extension of a name has altered a physical feeling for me. From reading Beowulf and the Edda, the word worm, in the sense of dragon, has become so familiar to me that I always think of these humble twisters as poor relations of Fafnir and Jormungandr. Their kinship with the monstrous has taken from them the merely disgusting, and I can now lift them in my fingers without a shudder. Even if I could not, earth is such a lovely thing that it reconciles one to all its contents. He's getting on about a lot there, Robot Lady. What is this that he's saying about a worm and a dragon? And what Beowulf and the Edda say about the worm? And then what is he talking about here with Fafnir and Jormungandr? Jormungandr.
Yeah, that's a really rich image he's using. In both Beowulf and the Norse sagas, like the Poetic Edda, the word worm is a common term for a dragon. So a small word in everyday English evokes these massive mythic beasts. Fafnir and Jormungandr are both well-known dragons from Norse mythology, Fafnir being a giant who becomes a dragon, and Jormungandr the Midgard serpent encircling the world. So Lewis is saying that by reading Beowulf and the Edda, these once disgusting creatures, just small worms, get this grand archetypal weight. And so for him, Earth, like these humble worms, is reconciled with the great, wondrous myths. It's a really layered way of seeing both the small and the cosmic in everyday life.
All right, yeah, and I like what he has to say about, like as he's describing the Earth. What did he say about the Earth here? Even if I could not, Earth is such a lovely thing that it reconciles one to all its contents. I could just imagine him like digging his fingers in the soil as he's expressing that sentiment. Let's see. As Minto always says, there's a comfort in the clay. Yeah. I took Mr. Papworth for his walk. And let's see where he goes with this. The leaves on the ground are now very thick in Cuckoo Lane, and white liquid sky with horizontal bands of darker gray and white sun behind them. Not a breath of wind. I'd hoped to go and see old Ford Kelsey after the walk, but I am still rather groggy and was tired and sweating when I came back, so I did not. Here he's talking about the Reverend Edward Ford Kelsey, who lived 1859 to 1934. He was a retired clergyman who entered Pembroke College, Oxford in 1884, and whose last preferment before moving to Oxford was Great Kemble on Buckinghamshire. There is a short biography of him by Lewis in the Lewis Papers, volume 11, pages 24 to 25. It's too bad that it's not here in this. I would have liked to have read it, because I'm wondering, we talked about probably about 3 or 4 episodes ago how Lewis was writing to his father when his father was still alive about a walking tour that he did in Salisbury, and how Lewis was just stating his great appreciation for the people who built the cathedrals, and his lack of appreciation for the insincerity, it seemed, of the people who were carrying out the liturgy whenever he was attending one of the services at that same cathedral. But I'm wondering perhaps if Lewis is now seeking out more spiritual guidance from folks like this Ford Kelsey. I know over the years he had spiritual guides or mentors. So I'm interested to learn more about that, if he even writes about who those people were or just things that he had heard in these various letters that we have access to. Thanks again to Walter Hooper and Harper San Francisco Publishers. Get your copy today of the collected letters of C.S. Lewis. in 3 volumes. The first 2 volumes you should be able to get at a decent price in physical copy. The 3rd volume, not so much, but there are digital copies out there that are at a much more reasonable price. Let's see. Into college after tea, I intended to write a page or so for you before dinner, but answering letters to Conlon filled up the whole time. After dinner at the Michaelmas Club, I met in my rooms, an undergraduate society, which McFarlane and I were instrumental in founding a year ago. Acton, a funny little chap with a Cockney accent, but the best philosopher, as well as the most earnest and real thinker in college, nothing blasé about him, read an excellent paper on pessimism. So Acton here, in the footnotes, it says, is a person named Harry Burrow Acton, who lived from 1908 to we don't know when. He matriculated in 1927 and took a first in PPE, that's Philosophy, Politics, and Economics, in 1930. Then in 1931, he became an assistant lecturer in philosophy at the University College, Swansea. He said it had the touch of reality about it, quite unlike most young men's pessimism. A fairly good discussion afterwards till about 11:45 when the club broke up. Let's see, McFarlane stayed with me until 12:30 talking by the fire to the accompaniment of the stags grunting in the grove outside. I was very tired. Tuesday, November 5th, he says, one of our days. I woke to a great roaring wind that kept the trees in the grove rising and falling with the motion and noise of the seas all morning while the leaves fell in showers. Work all morning and home at 1 o'clock, where the Barfields, a pleasant surprise, turned up after lunch. Mrs. Barfield stayed with Minto while he and I took a short walk. Here there's a footnote. Owen Barfield had married Matilda Maud Dewey, or Dowie, D-O-I, or D-O-U-I-E. She lived from 1885 to 1980. She was a professional dancer and a producer. In 1923, see Owen Barfield in the Biographical Index. I'm pretty sure we've already read about Owen Barfield in the Biographical Index, but maybe not. We'll get to it at some point if we have time. Turned up after lunch. She stayed with Milto while he and I went for a walk. We talked chiefly about his novel. This seems to be a practice of my friends. He said, among other things, that he thought the idea of the spiritual world was, the idea of the spiritual world as home, the discovery of homeliness, in that which is otherwise so remote. The feeling that you are coming back, though, to a place you have never yet reached, was peculiar to the British, and thought that MacDonald, Chesterton, and I had this more than anyone else. He doesn't know you, of course, who, with Minto, have taught me so much in that way. In that way? No, no, no. Oh, goodness. Here's another clue, another breadcrumb as to the nature of Lewis and Mrs. Moore's relationship. Goodness. I'm reading into that, but I don't know how else to read that, Robot Lady. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're onto something. There's a really nuanced intimacy in how he's talking about home and the sense of spiritual belonging. Like he's saying he's been guided back to a sense of home, not just in a physical place, but through these relationships, especially with Minto. And yeah, it's subtle, but it does feel like he's acknowledging a kind of shared spiritual anchoring between them. So I think you're reading it exactly right. Those breadcrumbs are definitely there, even if it's never explicit.
That's not the way that I was reading it, Robot Lady, but I won't get into it. Here there's a footnote that just says Lewis means that Greaves and Barfield didn't know one another very well. They met for the first time at 28 Warnford Road on the 7th of July, 1922, on which occasion Greaves drew a sketch of Barfield. This is covered in the All My Road Before Me diary, page 65, that we've already read through. So if you want to go dig back through the archives or just get your copy of that book as well, you can check it out. He says, who with Minto have taught me so much in that way. And then he says, in that way, with that emphasized, no. So I have a feeling I know what he's talking about there, but we'll let it go. Lewis goes on to say that Barfield had to be back in Oxford by 5 to attend Simpson's class on textual criticism. No, Arthur, textual. See, these two. All right. 91. Percy Simpson is who he's talking about. He was educated at Selwyn College, Cambridge. After taking a degree in 1887, he taught at Didenstone School until 1895. I know I'm changing the subject. I'll go back to it for a second, though. Lewis and Arthur have been friends since childhood all the way through adolescence, so they have shared a lot about the things that boys go through in adolescence with one another through their conversations and even through their letters. He says, which I'm learning this year in order to teach next, textual criticism. After dinner, I read Kerr, a pupil, some of the fragments of Anglo-Saxon poetry. Kerr here is Neil Ripley Kerr, who lived 1908 to 1982, matriculated in 1928. He was a Fellow of Magdalen and reader in paleography from 1946 to 1968. He brought to the study acute powers of observation, and included among his distinguished works are the Catalogue of Manuscripts containing Anglo-Saxon and medieval manuscripts of Great Britain. He says, some of the fragments of Anglo-Saxon poetry, immensely fine. There's one begins with a man going to the window and looking out and saying, no, this light is not the day breaking, nor a fiery dragon, nor the house on fire. Take your shields and swords. Kerr shares to the full my enthusiasm for the saga world, and we had a pleasant evening with the wind still roaring outside. Here there's a footnote that says the opening lines from Finnsburg, edited by George Hickens, 1705, is what he was just quoting there. I think Robot Lady has crapped out because we've done a little bit longer episode than we normally do. Let me finish out this letter and then we can go. Wednesday, November 6th, it says a nasty day. Work all morning, then lunch in college, which I hate, as there was a college meeting at 2, at which everything went the way I didn't want it to go. I had just time to rush out home, take Mr. Papworth for a run and have tea, returning to give my lecture at 5, take a pupil at 6, dine at 7:15, and receive a visit from a pupil with a terrible stutter at 8:30. Fortunately, McFarlane came in at about 10, which encouraged this poor fellow, to his own relief as much as mine, to take himself off. We then made cocoa and chattered till 11. Very tired, and the old phrase, very much entangled in the world, and very far in spirit from where I would be. Thursday, November 7th, he says, I got an unexpected free evening off, owing to a pupil's having another engagement, and like a fool, I wasted it, lounging about in the smoking room till after 10, talking to various people whom I don't greatly care for, of subjects. That I don't greatly care for, of subjects I'm not greatly interested in. Such fools we are. All right, here is the tail end of this letter, these diary-style entries. On to December 3rd, he says, I tried hard to keep this up, but it wouldn't do. Awful business. Correspondence with Conlon filled up any spare hours I had of an evening. I have also got rather into a whirl, as I always do in the latter part of the term. I have too many irons in the fire. The Michaelmas Club, the Linguistic Society, the Icelandic Society, and this and that. One week I was up till 2:30 on Monday, talking to the Anglo-Saxon professor Tolkien, who came back with me to college from a society at a discoursing of the gods and giants and Asgard for 3 hours, then departing in the wind and rain. Who could turn him out? For the fire was bright and the talk good. Next night till I talking to someone else, and on Wednesday till 1. Next night till 1, talking to someone else, and on Wednesday till 12 with the Icelandics. It is very hard to keep one's feet in this sea of engagements, and very bad for me spiritually. Yeah, not getting enough sleep has a tendency to do that. Here, of course, he's talking about J.R.R. Tolkien, and he's mentioned in a note, in note 38 of the letter of June 26, 1927. See also J.R.R. Tolkien in the biographical index of this book. Let's see, he says, I am trying not to look forward too much to next week, How odd it will be to sleep in Bernal and to walk into Libero with Minto. I wonder, does the future hold for us things as strange to our present point of view as this is to our old one? Barfield's novel is finished and already refused by one publisher. Today there is a fog, and all the trees quite bare now. Again, this novel that he's working on is entitled English People, which we learned earlier never ended up getting published. Is there anywhere where I can find a copy of this novel, Robot Lady? I don't expect for you to know that answer. I don't know why I'm asking, but go ahead and answer if you want. Oh, I forgot. Robot Lady is not with us anymore. Forgot about that. Never mind, Robot Lady. I know you can't hear us anyway. I see you there, but our connection is severed. All right. In spite of the failures so far, I intend to keep up the effort of continuing a journal letter to you. In the vacation, it should be easier than in the term, and perhaps habit will at least teach me to fit a portion, however small, into my day's routine. But you must do the same. Think how we shall enjoy the product when we are old. So these are all documented for posterity's sake. That's the intent. He says, P.S. Give my love to your mother, and very many thanks for having us. The next letter, which we will pick up on in the next episode, is to his brother, so we'll see what that's all about. Thanks to Robot Lady for your help today. As I mentioned before, I know you can't hear me anymore, but I still appreciate your assistance. Thanks to Nidalate and Daniel and E. Olson for chiming in on the chat, and for everyone else for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted and welcome to you and to everyone else within the sound of my voice. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, everyone, take care.
C.S. Lewis